Hi, welcome to the October 1st, 2021 Club Cubase live stream. I'm going to do a quick audio test, make sure everything is going through as expected. Give me just a moment and listen to this test. And we'll get started. Okay, everything sounds fine on my monitoring computer. My name is Greg Undo. I'll be the host for the live stream today. And how it works if you haven't attended a Club Cubase live stream is we can ask questions in the live chat field, or we could just simply email questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. I will try to go through all the questions as completely and succinctly as possible when asking questions. If we could try to indicate which version of Cubase, whether it's like Cubase 11 Pro, or if we're doing, or if you're running on Macintosh or Windows platform, that information is helpful as well. So we will, I want to thank a couple of people before we get started. So we will have a index of all the topics covered in today's session pinned to the top of the comments field. Later tonight, it takes a couple hours to get that done. So if it's not up right after, just bear with me while I'll take a quick break for dinner, and then I'll go and start working on the index, which takes a couple hours. And if you wanted to search for index topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com, which is kind of run by Jan. And we have two people that serve as moderators. So we have Jazz Dude and Agent K. So they're always, they volunteer their time just to kind of help out to make the live stream run smoother. And they can sometimes address questions or issues that come up before I reach them, because my ability to answer questions in a real-time manner, will be lost after a number of questions are asked, but we'll try to catch up. And also, if you're looking for another wonderful resource of information, you can go to the Cubase Nation Discord channel, and Jazz Dude does a lot of work with that, compiling information and tutorials there. So it's a wonderful resource in addition to all the great official Steinberg materials. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I'm going to be the host. I work as a product specialist in the United States for Yamaha Corporation of America, and I primarily focus on Steinberg products. And we can go ahead and get started. So I think we had a question before the live stream had started, just on about... Let me see. It was about how to do guitar tablature above the 7th fret in the score editor. So this may have kind of scrolled off before we got started. So let's say if I wanted to come in, and I'll just do some quick step entry here. All right, and if we want to look at that in our score editor, we can come over here. So we can see our guitar tab, and just based on the actual notes, we could see that we could already have these indicated, above the 7th fret. And sometimes I get this question on how to move voices. So let's say if I wanted to take these voices and maybe we can quantize them down. So let's say I'll just move these to D3, but how to get some of these above the 7th fret. So if you just click on the note here in the particular, right click on the tablature. So, once we go to tablature mode, we could just kind of double click here. And from the main area, so we can go to the score settings, which you could also access directly from the score menu. Go to tablature, and then you just want to make sure that tablature mode is enabled, and you could have kind of standard guitar tuning or other guitar tunings kind of automatically applied. So I will come over here. So let's say we'll apply that, and now we could get this second staff. So if I wanted to adjust the position of the tab for string. So it'll kind of give you a default position, but if you wanted to switch strings, you could now just come over here and say move to string 2 or move to, you know, and at this point you could choose to move it to different strings. So I say, okay, let's move this to string 4. You know, we could see that the fret, the tablature here would automatically update to kind of show those particular changes like that. So again, just kind of right click. But as you can see, by default, you can go, you know, depending on the range of the notes, it may, you know, may only be available above the 7th fret on particular strings, or it may kind of automatically work. But if you wanted to, you know, select a bunch of notes, and let's see if we can move multiple notes at once, we could just select multiple notes and then right click and move it to the desired string. Okay, and we saw a little bit of discussion from John Black. Hi Greg, I have a problem with Cubase 11 Pro after installing the SSD drive. From where I boot the PC now, Cubase is on the old HDD. Once opened, it has nothing in it, no VST, not even registered. I want to install it on the new SSD drive, but I cannot run the installation on the SSD since it shows an error in the download assistant or from the Steinberg website. I have a registered USB-E licenser, just that unfortunately lost the other codes, keys on the case while moving to a new flat. I'm a little bit desperate now. Hope you can help me install Cubase properly on the new SSD with all the stock plugins. Very sorry for the multiple messages, but I could use some of the help. So I kind of replied a little bit before the live stream started, just about, you know, using, so, you know, generally, you know, if you have everything installed, you might, you know, so it sounds like maybe you have the Cubase installed. So if you go to the Steinberg download assistant, and you mentioned later that you're getting a Java security access controller privileged native message, you can't run the program dot command. So I'm not sure if you're running this on Mac or PC, but you know, one of the things, you know, if you could tell us which operating system you're running, but you know, you should, if you have the e-licenser on the, you know, if you have the license already on the e-licenser, you know, you know, and with that, you should be able to just go to, and I think I included the link of where you could download it directly from the Steinberg website. You know, if it was on a Windows platform, I may say that you could just try to, you know, try to run it as administrator, but maybe it's an administrator rights issue as well. So, you know, and also make sure that you didn't download like the Mac version for Windows or the Windows version for Mac. That may be able to, that may cause some messages kind of like that. So, but it, you know, it should be pretty straightforward once you have the license actually on the particular e-licenser. All right, so we see Jazz Dude, we see Pablo from Galicia, España. All right, we have Robbie Bowling from Dallas. All right, and we see Jan from Stockholm. We have Matt Elston from London. All right, we have Soren from Sweden. It's great to see you on the Zoom meetup. All right, we have Capital Razor checking in, and John Costigan. It's great to see you on the Zoom meetup as well. And Dallas LaRue from Las Vegas. Okay, and we have Michael Pierce is going to join us for the first hour or so. All right, so a question from Dallas LaRue. Let's see. I made a macro in a project editor to color drums red, kick, snare, etc. It works fine except for a couple of tracks. It'll shift the measures from where they are on 2 down to measure 1. Okay, so just Dallas, if you could, if you want to send a picture of like maybe a screenshot of your macro. So I'm not sure if you made a macro in a Project Logical editor or if you just made a Project Logical editor preset to colorize the drums. So it says it works fine on a couple of tracks. It will shift the measures from where they are on 2 down to measure 1. So if you could send me, a picture of your Project Logical editor preset. So, and if you've made it in a macro, maybe the macro is containing something else, but, so something that could cause your shifts to track is, if you say media type is equal, or we'll say just container type is equal to folder, to a track, or to an event, here we could just say position, and, we could say subtract, 1 measure. So if I have an event here, I could just select and, move that by 1 measure. So maybe there's something like that was in there within the Project Logical editor. But if you want to email it to me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I'd be happy to take a look at it for you. All right. And we see Uno Momento from Finland on the live stream. All right, and Graham Witcher's able to make it. Is usually on later, so we're glad you can make it earlier. All right, and we have Dan Freeman checking in from Atlanta. Okay, so we just have, hey Greg, my question is if there's a detect silence feature on Cubase 10 Pro or Nuendo 10 or Cubase 11 Pro. So yeah, all you have to do is I will just come over here and let me just copy this a couple of times and I'll render it kind of as one file. So just bear with me just for a second and we'll show this to you. I'll just have a file where we could detect silence. So I'm going to go to my audio menu and let's say our audio file is like this. So if I select the event, we go to audio and we could go to, I think it's under advanced to detect silence. And then at this point, we could set your threshold. So we can say, okay, anything below minus 16 dB. And at that point, we could actually just kind of, we could adjust. And at that point, we could just go through and detect and remove the silence like so. So once again, it's going to be audio to advanced to detect silence. Okay, so we see a question from Ted Springman. Great to see you on the live stream. Can Spectral layers export fundamental and harmonics separately to their own audio tracks to experiment with mixing levels? So it may not, we could select based on fundamental. So let's say if I wanted to look at maybe like a vocal file here. So let's say... We'll take a look at this and let's go to spectral layers. So I'll just go to my extensions, to spectral layers. And if you have the Pro version, you're going to have the ability to, let's come over here. So we could, pretty clearly see kind of the harmonic overtone series where we see the fundamental and then first, second, third, fourth, fifth order harmonics. So I think if we just wanted to go here, we could actually just select kind of harmonic selection. So at this point, we could just take a particular phrase, and then if you wanted to, make a new layer based on just a harmonic selection, you could do that, but it's not necessarily going to, it may not aid so much in mixing, but you could select, based on for an individual file, kind of the harmonic overtone series, and this will work better and will be clearer than on an isolated part as opposed to a total mix. But you could, do the, when you go to the layer, and if you unmix the stems, you could experiment with that. So in the full version, just kind of come over here and you'll see just in this selection tool, you could right click and choose instead of frequency selection, you could choose harmonic selection. So okay, we see JazzDid wants people to smash the like button. That enables us to continue to do these live streams. So we just see, is there a way to display only the VST3 version of certain plugins when creating a new insert effect? I always select the wrong plugin instance, which usually has less features than the VST3 version. So to do this, an easy way to do this is just to go into your VST plugin manager. And you could see, if we go to, let's say, our VST effects, we could say, okay, when I come here, we could have only, these plugins, and we could create a collection. So if we just come here, we could just say, okay, let's go to a new collection and we want to copy the current collection. So we'll say, and we'll just call this VST3. And once we're in here, we could just say, okay, if this wasn't a VST3 plugin, you could just right click and delete this, and then it's not going to show up within the plugins that you're having. So you could create your own custom plugins and just kind of come right over here and choose not to look at the VST2 versions. So as we work with that, you could just get just not include the VST2 versions of the particular plugins in the VST plugin manager. And again, that's accessed from your studio menu to VST plugin manager. And always, great thing to do is, many programs will also give you the option to to only install the VST3 or to install it with VST3 and VST2. All right, so we're seeing Dan Freeman giving kudos to Pablo's performance on the Hot Mess recordings. So that's great. Yeah, Pablo did a wonderful job. All right, and we see that Michael Teens is on the live stream from Weatherford, Texas, and he celebrated his birthday, I believe, on Wednesday. So happy belated birthday to Michael Teens. So we'll everyone come up with your own creative ice cream flavors to give to Michael Teens on today's live stream. We appreciate everything you do, Michael. All right. All right, so we just see a question. Can audio be quantized randomly by percentage? So let's say if I wanted to go back to this particular file. So, generally if we wanted to do kind of percentage based, so let's say if I wanted to select this audio file here, and I'll just kind of reset. So let's say if I just come directly here, I'm going to go to my quantize panel. And at this point, we could just say, okay, I wanted to quantize this to eighth notes. And once we kind of come over here, so I think, as we're dealing with audio, we could kind of set your safe range of ticks right here. So if I wanted to quantize now just this audio event, we make sure that we have the audio warp. So it's not like the iterative quantize, but this will kind of give you the similar effects of that. And now you could just kind of quantize based on different settings here. So you can say, okay, I want this to be eighth note triplets, and we could quantize the audio just like that, but it's not random. It will be kind of specified, but you can specify certain areas within the audio file for it not to take effect. All right, so I just saw to see from John Costigan, what kind of fretless bass strings do you use for that great tone, flat wounds, round wounds? So I think the fretless I used on the Hot Mess recordings was just a Warwick, just a Warwick Corvette with so it's a Babinga wood with a ebony fingerboards. I use round wounds on it, so I think they might be even roto sounds. So I try not to play too hard on it, and I haven't had much fret wear on it, but I'm kind of a round wound guy personally. So all right, so we see Jay from Connecticut on the live stream. Glad you could join us. All right, and we have Sam from London, and is it Crocante from Los Angeles. All right, we have SP Records, and we have Hassan from Oslo. All right, so we have a question. How do you assign LFO to effects? Okay, so if I wanted to come here, so let's show this. So we could kind of do it. You could get like a little loop back tool. So there's number shareware ones, but let me just see if we could get this set up quickly. Okay, so let's say if I wanted to assign effects, so we could kind of do this through the generic remote. All right, so let's say, and if you're not familiar with what an LFO is, it's kind of a way of just having something modulate with kind of regularity. All right, so let's say, like on this particular track, I will I'll just start it from to save some time. So let's say we'll just. Okay, so what we could do with an LFO is just kind of have an auto LFO plugin, and we could have this control different parameters. And on an instrument, we could have this set up to do, so let's say if I wanted to come here. So this is actually just like a pad sound. And I set up an auto LFO. On on this instrument. So what I wanted it to do is we go to the MIDI inserts. And I'm gonna just turn on the auto LFO. So I got one that does panning. And one that's just gonna do so we could just have this kind of do volume and panning. So we could have this kind of automatically give you that type of effect, but assigning, and we could do this easily because we could assign a learn CC function and then send this LFO to this plugin. Now, not all audio plugins have a learn CC message. So let's say if I wanted to go to, and I wanted to assign the position of this particular filter, and I wanted to assign this to an LFO, but there's no learn CC parameter. And so what I could do is I'm going to just create a kind of a MIDI track here where I'm going to assign the LFO, and I'm going to take its output and we're going to route it to a loop back. Now, what I want to do is to go into my studio setup, and I realize this is, you know, once you do this a couple times, it's not so bad. But we're going to go to, let's say, generic remote, and I want to click on the learn button, and we're going to have this coming from the IAC driver. Okay, so now what we want to do is say, okay, we're going to have fader 2 here, and we want this to be on, and we'll go to our VST mixer, to our drums, and we will go to insert 1, and I wanted to adjust the position. So now when I click on learn, this will, so I'll learn this. So once we have that learned, at that point, this track is sending through a MIDI insert, the auto LFO, through the generic remote, going into this so that we could have our glitch drums automatically, that particular plugin parameter responding. So if we wanted to listen to it, and within the plugin, I can say, okay, I want this to be like every measure, every 2 measures. So at that point, I could have that LFO just on that particular plugin parameter that didn't have a MIDI learn. So once you kind of set up a MIDI loopback, then you could send that MIDI into other parts of the program. And on the Mac platform, you could use an IAC bus, or I think Loopy on the Windows platform, but there's several shareware ones. All right, so I just see question. I created 8 instrument tracks plus 1 vocal track. Each track has several plugins. How come with an Intel i7 computer and 32 gigs of RAM, it's still insufficient? So it could really depend on, you know, if you put like, you know, depending on the instrument tracks that you're using. You know, some instruments are going to take a tremendous amount of CPU resources. If you're trying to do an orchestral thing and, you know, one of the instrument tracks is, you know, layered with, you know, can take, you know, 4 gigabytes of RAM per instance, and you're streaming that from your hard disk, that, you know, could be problematic. So, you know, if you could let us know like which 8 instruments you're using and which plugins. So if you're using like a convolution reverb on each of the tracks as inserts, you know, that could, you know, kill your CPU pretty quickly. So if you're running really intensive reverbs, convolution reverbs, that could do it. So, so if you could let us know exactly, so if you have the option, like if you're running reverbs as inserts, run one reverb, as long as you can, and just have it, use aux sends, and that could make a huge difference. So, it's a little vague as you describe. So, but if you could let us know what instruments and what types of plugins you're running, that would help. But, but you should be able to do that pretty easily. But you may have to kind of allocate some of your plugins to meet your CPU. All right. So we see Michael Pierce is saying that the Zoom session on Tuesday was really interesting. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that. And it was great to have Vince Melamed and Fred Corey join us. All right. Wonderful to see Millard Brown from Pennsylvania. All right. So we just see, hi, Greg. As menus changing based on context of what's selected / open, is there a way to keep root key menu always showing? Please request developers provide method to always access project root key. All right. So let's say if I just want it to, so are you just doing the root key from up top here? So if that's where you're doing it, so I think kind of no matter which menu I'm in, that the project root key stays active. So let me know, Jay, if this is the root key that you want to see active, or if it's like part of the chord track, like, and when you use the chord track, seeing it in the global editors, like if I, let's say if I have a chord track here and I want to see the chord track directly within my MIDI editors. So let's say if I have that, and I'm in the full screen editor, and seeing the global track. So if you wanted to see that, where you see the key that's determined there. So let me know which one, but it looks like this when we look at the project root key at the top here is part of the tools and the different options and icons that will appear for the project, that it looks like that will stay, maybe not if you're in the full screen mixer view, but anything where the project window is active looks like it stays. All right, so we see, all right, that the detect silence was, so couldn't find it, and so now you know where it's at, so that's great. All right, so we just see, can I ask my question here? Yes, you could definitely ask your question. Just ask in the chat field. All right. See that Gareth says hello to everyone. Hopefully he can make the live stream a little bit later on. All right, so we see, how do I change the background display? I want to see all subdivisions and not only when I zoom in. So I think, this, I think if you're at a zoom level like this and you just see constant lines, at what point, so that's kind of how it's designed, so that when you get to, particular zoom levels, that they will automatically work that way, because let's say if we saw the subdivisions of, 128th notes or 64th notes here. Would you want to see basically just a white line that, may not make any sense? So I think that makes sense, but if there's another kind of workflow, like, as you zoom in, that the grid intensity can adjust accordingly based on your zoom level. But, I think if we're at a zoom level like this, you don't want to see just like white lines all the way across. So, but let me know if I'm misunderstanding. Okay, so we just see, so question, I have discovered glide, and it's almost always when doing MIDI instrument solo. On a VST instrument that doesn't have glide, can I create the glide effect on the MIDI in some way? So sometimes people will utilize, like some of the instruments may respond to portamento. Some may also just, respond a bit to the particular instrument. May have it. So a lot of instruments, but it's not just, there's MIDI informations that could do it, but sometimes if the instrument you're doing doesn't support it, then that could be tricky. But let me just see if I could. And you might be able to utilize the sampler track. So let's say if I just wanted to come, let me just look for a particular project here. All right, let me just see if I can find this file real quick. See if this is it. Sorry. Okay, so, with the, so even if we had just kind of a, let's say, like I was doing this and this sound didn't necessarily, like this instrument didn't have a glide function. If you just take one note, we could drag and drop that directly into the sampler track. So let's say if we do this, and now I could just trigger our new sampler track, and at this point we could choose to, okay, we're going to put it into monophonic mode. And then if you wanted to just do kind of glides, so let's say, okay, we just want to take this and so you could kind of set the amount of the glide. So even if you just have one MIDI note, just, you could just take one single note and just drag that part to the sampler track. And then you could just play and do your glides there. So give that a try, Soren. It was great to see you on the Zoom meetup. All right. Okay, so we have a question. All right, we just did that one. Sorry. Okay, so we have a question from Taylor. Says, what do the numbers in the HMT type mean? The 3, 5, 7. Does that mean tuning is only applied to the 3rd, 5th, and 7th? So once we go to the to your HMT mode, we can do this by going to your project setup, and this is for her mode tuning. So once we have this, this will indicate that we're going to have the 3rds and 5ths perfectly in tune, or the 3rds, 5ths, and 7ths perfectly in tune. So that's how it would choose to do the pitch shifting and alter it from the equal temperament. So that will just kind of show you which intervals will be purely in tune on the file. So we're seeing Dan Freeman just saying, hot mess, your mix was so clear. I wish I could download a project and see your techniques. And I need to use sites that have free projects to learn. So I think, Michael Teams and Gareth did a lot of the mixing on that. So, kudos to them. Okay, so we just see loop recording. How can you record audio in and have each loop record to a new track? The recording vocals, like recording vocals for the Grace Kelly Harmony Challenge. Okay, so let's say if we wanted to do that, so generally when we do an actual recording, like a loop recording, so let's just say I'll add an audio track here. And we want to just do a loop recording. So if we just come over here and let's say we're doing a cycle recording. Okay, and let's just imagine we have like the perfect background vocals, and we'll do several passes of this. All right, so now we look at it and we're gonna have all of our lanes appear. And so this will play one at a time, which is the intention, so that you could very easily come over here and pick the best parts. But if we wanted to take this and stack the vocals, what I could do is select all the lanes, right click, and then we'll say create tracks from lanes. And when you do that, you may have to just simply grab like the mute tool and unmute. But once you do that, now what was lanes, where you're hearing one event at a time, you can now just kind of split out and have those lanes appear in tracks. So once again, just select the lanes, hold down the shift key, right click in the lanes, and once again, create tracks from lanes. So that's a really fast way of doing it. Okay, so we have a question from Peter K. What's the easiest way to set up a headphone mix if you're not using the control room? So, what a lot of people have done traditionally with consoles is to, when you go to, let's say we have our mix console here, and you could set up just a send and you could send this output, so let's say if I just want to send it to my stereo out. So let's say if I have this as a headphone output, and if you need to do, and I'll just reread the question just so I make sure. Okay, so if you wanted to do kind of a separate headphone mix, so let's say I'll just come here, let's go to our audio connections, and I'll just set up, I'll add a stereo bus. And we'll just call this phones. So at this point, I could say, okay, I wanted to take all of these audio tracks here, and I will enable a quick link, and I can go to descend, and I will just say, okay, we're going to select all these tracks, and I want to send them to my phone's output channel. And at this point, we could send varying amounts of each track to the headphone mix. And this phone's output channel could be connected, directly to, sorry, you opened the wrong window, could be connected directly to where your headphone, like outputs of where that's feeding a headphone amplifier system. So you could do it like that. So you could use just simply effect sends and then send each of these tracks to the headphone output and feed. That's one way of doing it without having to have without having to use control room. So. All right, so we see a nice comment from Graham just saying, I so wish I could think of a question to ask Greg. I've learned so much in this forum that there's nothing in my music that I can't think of that I need help with. So it's great. That's why we're glad to be able to help. And sometimes it's great to learn stuff that you didn't know that you had a question for yet and kind of maybe piece together a couple of concepts that can help you. So I just see there's a project root key up top. That was precisely what I was looking for, but it's not showing for me. Today I'm in a laptop in Cubase Elements 11. Does Elements have the project root key option? All right, so let me just, I think I may have another version of Cubase. All right, so let's say if I come here and I have Elements open. Let's see if the root key option is in Elements quickly. So it doesn't look like the project root key functionality is a part of Cubase Elements. So that's probably why you're not seeing it. All right, so we just see question, why is the top of my head always harder to shave than sides and the back? So, don't know. I haven't shaved my head, so, but maybe you don't see it in the mirror or something. So we just see a question. What if we have too complicated a question to ask here? I've installed Cubase on 2 different devices, PC and Cubase LE3 on iPad, and had nothing but trouble. So you could always, if you have a more detailed question, please send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. We see I haven't been able to record one single track, let alone anything else. So, and also if you could let us know which audio interface you're using, that would be helpful. Okay, read through questions. All right, so we have a question from Jan. If the global icon crossfade is active, I always assure that it will cut at zero crossing wave edge in all operations when comping, Shift X, or with the scissors tool. So, when we do, the zero crossing, we could think of that as more for like editing functionality. So if we leave this on here, you could place the crossfades, and the crossfades aren't as critical for, may not be as critical for zero crossing because you could compensate for it within the crossfade itself. But if we activate, Jan, just the snap to zero crossing, like when I do a fade, when I try to do an edit, like let's say if I come here and I try to cut at specific areas, I'll just take my grid off here. So let's say I zoom in and we're looking directly, let's say right here, you notice that I can't cut. Like I can only cut at the zero where it's doing a zero crossing for the waveform. So the crossfades could be different from that. Obviously, the crossfades can kind of mitigate that when you're doing it, but just the zero crossing, like if we have this turned on, it's actually just going to limit us to only make an edit at a zero crossing. So once this is turned off, I can cut here, which would probably introduce a little pop or click very subtly. It's maybe not so subtle, but with this turned on here. So it's kind of that, the zero crossing could be independent of the crossfade because the crossfade can kind of get you around that and fix that when you're doing a particular edit. But if you didn't want to have to do a crossfade, you could enable the snap to zero crossing when you're doing edits. Okay, so we have a question. Is there an easy way to change tempo without moving MIDI or audio? All right, so let's say if I have, just open up a project to show this real quick. Okay. Okay, so if I come over here, let's say I have this MIDI and audio track, and a lot of times if I change the tempo, and we look at, let's say we add a ruler track here, and we have the ruler track set to seconds. So let's say if I come right here, we can see that like that point of the song is 20 seconds. And if I adjust the tempo, we could see the time changing accordingly. So if I wanted to be able to, and that could mean that the MIDI and audio is speeding up if it's in musical mode to match the new tempo. So if I don't want the tracks to speed up, I could select the tracks here, and we could take each of the tracks and switch their mode from musical mode to linear mode. And that's what this little icon is here. So now when I do an edit, let's say at 40 seconds, and I change the tempo, these tracks aren't going to respond to the tempo changes. So that's how you could do it. Just place the tracks, and you could do this on audio files themselves or at the track level. Place it from musical mode to linear mode, and then they will not follow. You could change the tempo and they'll still be at the same time. Okay, so just seeing just little comments on computers and NASA. So yeah, I think the Apollo missions were done on 16K of memory because my dad worked on that. So made sure that code was tight. All right. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. So it's myself, Vishnu, and I'm from India. I want to ask about the export function, the second option in the menu. While using it, the rendered file always comes in 32-bit float, even if the project is 24-bit. So let me take a look. So let's go to export. Okay, so I just see, I want to ask about the second option in the menu. All right, so I'm not sure if it's this, if it's the export audio mixdown. All right, so it's just saying while using it, the rendered audio always comes in 32-bit, even if the project is at 24-bit. So it's probably, if you're including effects, the effects being included, you'd want it to be at 32-bit floating point, especially if you're rendering like effects that are built in. So, if you actually render the effects, at that point, it makes sense that it's in 32-bit floating point. So you have the original 24-bit file, and that's perfectly fine because, once you add any EQ or change anything, you'd change the volume 1/1000th of a dB up or down. It's playing back through the audio engine, and it's not a 24-bit file. It's being processed everything at 32-bit. So. All right, we see Sable Winters in the live streams. Great to see you on the Zoom meetup on Tuesday. So we see question, running Cubase on PC or Mac, do they both work the same? Is one platform better than the other? Macs are getting so expensive. So really they're identical. I go back and forth between, my Mac that I use for work and my PC that I use for my studio all the time. So it's, I think Cubase is equally strong on either platform. So it's really just a personal preference. All right, so I just saw just a comment. So it says, "Hey Greg, just to let you know if you don't see my comment and on the last stream." So I think I saw So and this was a question, we had a discussion about contact audio dropouts. We deleted the VST3 and started to use the VST2, and that fixed everything. So, I think it's a new version. I think it's, Native Instruments' first time they're doing a VST3 plugin. So, maybe it'll continue to improve over time, but I'm glad that you got it sorted out. So, but realize it's a fairly new thing for them. All right, so just seeing a question, and this was directed to Jazz Dude, but so do you know if it's possible to drag Native Instruments machine Mark III tracks, patterns, and scenes into Cubase? Sorry, just figured it out while I was here. So I know you could do it in Groove Agent, but it's really kind of up to the plugin that you do it. So. Okay, we have a question. Is there a way to double click an event and have it always put up the detached edit window instead of the edit window in the dock? So all you have to do is go to your preferences, and under editors, you could just choose that double click opens. This will be set to the lower zone, and just choose double click opens editor in a window. So hit apply. And now when you double click, it'll go into a separate window as opposed to the lower zone. So if I just double click on, here, if I double click on the sample editor, I could do that. So once again, go to preferences, to editors, and double click opens editor in lower zone in a window. And you could toggle between, using the key commands to open it in a window and double click to open the lower zone, or the opposite. All right, so we have Alexander from Moscow joining us. Thanks for joining on. So we're seeing a comment from Clayton, says, I like Mac and PC and iOS and Android. Why limit myself, I figure. So I figured all operating systems are great and they're all terrible. So once you figure that out, it all makes sense. All right, so we have a question. How do I get audio files into Padshop? So I'll go ahead and open up an instance of Padshop. So we'll just come right over here. And this is with Padshop 2. Will I do this? In previous versions, there was a Padshop Pro update for like $10. But if you wanted to do this, so, when we work with Padshop, you can have kind of, it's doing with an audio file. So if I wanted to, let's say, even just come over, let's say if I wanted to take this audio file, just drag it, and you'll see like the green plus sign. And now, then you could just take any audio file from the project and, again, just kind of drag it right into the red zone, and then so you can now just kind of come over here. And as soon as you start playing, you could now So you could do stuff like this. So any audio file, just kind of drag and drop it right in. Okay, reading through comments. So we see from Jazz Dudes, was this question already answered? How do I edit the back grid? I would like to see all subdivisions at all time, even when I'm zooming out. Thanks. So yeah, we did answer that. So it's, you know, it's kind of automatically handled. And, you know, and as I mentioned before, you may not want to see, you know, 64th note divisions at resolutions like this, because it could be more of a hindrance and an eyesore. So it just kind of does it automatically. Okay, reading through comments here. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, is there a way to store my color palettes in Cubase no Windows? So if I work on an RPC, I could just load them up. So I think the easiest way to do this, so the color palette isn't necessarily, is kind of based on the project. So if you just simply, you know, have a project with a particular color palette, so say if we go to, you know, your project color setup and, you know, you have this setup, you know, you could just simply store a project and open that project, and that would transfer all the color palettes that you've built up into other computers quite easily. So just, you know, save a project. I don't even think you need to have any notes in it or any audio, but just store a .cpr file. Right. Okay, so we have from Dan Freeman. I see things like synth pad in Hallian Sonic. What's a pad? So pad is often kind of a sound that will, you know, like we could think of it like strings. So let's say if I wanted to come over here, let's just go through. Padshop is very good at it as well, but let's do just a little bit of Hallian Sonic SE. So it's a category of instrument sounds. So let's say if I wanted to come over here to synth pads, you know, so you're going to have a lot of kind of, you know, very lush and thick sounds that can, like that part of the sound. So let's say, like where you'll have often, you know, sounds that are just kind of held. Like this is, So, you know, you get, let me just, so sounds are often, like that's a very typical pad sound. So let's say if I would just want to come here. This is very, so those types of synth sounds that kind of fill in a lot of harmonic space and often, you know, are held for long periods of time, that will be, you know, considered like a pad sound. And sometimes you may have it kind of layered with like a bell sound, like for an attack. And even if you wanted to get into like Retrolog, has some great like analog synth pads as well. So just show a couple of those. And yeah, they're very useful for just kind of filling out sounds. So you're not going to play anything that's like those won't really speak to often have a slow attack, but so those are kind of typical pad sounds for a synthesizer. All right, so we can see Captenergy Music, just wishing everyone a happy October. Yeah, it's hard to believe it's already October. All right, so we just see just from Evans, the Bards, just saying, I'm so thankful for the stream. Just 3 years ago, I barely knew how to open my project in Cubase, and because of you, I'm able to create full orchestral scores. So thanks for sharing that. I'm glad the live streams have been helpful. All right, so we just see from having problem with new update of Cubase on Mac, High Sierra doesn't load 11.04. So I'm not sure if High Sierra is actually a supported operating system, so you may want to check that. But you know, if you could, you know, if it's you know, you say it doesn't load, if you could let us know if it installed, or if it's not loading up, like it's maybe catching a plugin or something like that. But I don't think High Sierra is still supported OS, but I could be mistaken. All right, so we see Michael Pierce has had to kind of dash off. Hopefully he can make it back before the end of the live stream. I think he does tutoring on Fridays. Okay, so you just see, I want to be able to edit a project by looking at all the project, not just zooming in. All right, so let's say I'll just open up kind of a larger project here. Okay, so let's say if I have this, I think if we just, all right, we'll just get some drums loaded up. So So let's say if I just wanted to, there are some, so usually you could, I'm not sure what the correlation is, but let's say if we just go to zoom, you could go to zoom full, and that will allow you to, see, the project laid out for you. So it says I want to be able to edit a project by looking at all the project, not just zooming in. So, I mean, you could edit, independent of the zoom level. Something else that a lot of people might miss is if you go to the project setup here, that you could have an overview of the project at the top. And this would allow you to just, see different parts, but you could also just, zoom full. So if you wanted to just, come right over here, and you could assign key commands for this, but if you wanted to, just come right here and just assign, let's say zoom to event, but, you could assign a zoom full, or just kind of say, okay, I want it to see my entire project from the overview. So if you could let me know if there's anything that's preventing you from editing without having to zoom in, make sure I'm understanding. So I just see from Jay, it's did I miss the answer to multiple sound click tracks? So I think I may have missed that, Jay. So if you could just ask the question again, I could probably get to it. Sorry about that. Okay, reading through comments. Sorry if I missed some questions. Apologize for that. Okay, so we just see, is there a way to print a MIDI VST into audio inside one project? So, I mean, yeah, you could definitely, there's, many different ways of doing it. So let's say if I wanted to take, let's say if I wanted to take, let me just see if I can find. Here, I'll just go to another project here real quick. All right, so let's say if we just jump back to this project, and, if we wanted to, you could, render in place, you could export, but, if I take this piano sound, and I wanted to, have it, be recorded and print it in real time, I could just, let's say, add this, I'll select this track, and I'm going to just, add a group track using this. So let me just come over here in the mix console. So let's say we have the grand selected. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to add a group track. So I want to send the audio out of this instrument here. And I could send it to the group. So I could even just kind of come right over here. Let's send this to group 2. I'll turn this on. So now as I play the piano, we'll see it in group 2. And now I want to add an audio track. And we're going to set its input from group 2. So I'll just say, let's add a track. So now as I play, I could record both MIDI and audio simultaneously. So I'll just come here and I'll just arm this audio track. So now as we do this, so you could just take the piano and assign it to a, to a group track, and then have an audio track with its input if you wanted to just kind of print it like that. So that's how you could print a VST. And if I wanted to also just come here to this particular event, I could just say, okay, let's go to edit and render in place. And I could include different effects categories, and I could just say, okay, render it if you want to do it offline and have that rendered just the same way. It kind of gets you the same results, but if you wanted to record both the MIDI and audio simultaneously, that's a pretty easy thing to do, is route it through a group track. Okay, so just seeing a question, and it just says, okay, is it just me, or does your limiter get out of phase when used as an effect send? So, generally limiters would be used as insert effects, because, but we could take a listen to it here quickly. So let's say if I have all my drums, and let's route these to a group channel, so generally, limiters would be, run as inserts, because you probably don't want to blend the, have the original source blended with that in that way. So, okay, so let's say I have all my drums. So I'll just come here to the limiter. And I'll just come over here to our control room and all right, so now if I turn this off and we just kind of look at phase. So doesn't seem to be any real difference in our phase metering here. So say we have our phase going on right there. So that's on. So, but generally it's going to be run as an insert, but it's, as you can see, it seem to be introducing any phase problems when running it as a send. It's atypical, but, you could definitely do it. Okay. Okay. So I just see if I get some more audio going out. All right. So I'll send a little more audio out for you, John. Thanks for letting me know. Okay, so we just see, hi, have downloaded the files for Halion Symphonic Orchestra and 4-knob Pop D after purchase using the download assistant on one PC. I wish to take those files to my music PC. So, you could just, they're going to be just, they'll show up in your downloads folder. But one thing that you could do if you did install them on a different computer is, you could use the utility for the Steinberg Library Manager. And if you go to the Steinberg Library Manager, you could just say, okay, I want it to go to Halion Sounds. And let's say we have the Halion Symphonic Orchestra. And you could just click on Move. And then, so I think I have stuff open, but if you don't have Cubase open, you could just click on Move and then choose the location on the disk that you want. And you could put on a USB like flash drive or something like that, and then take it over to your music PC. And then you could right click on your music PC and on the .vst sound file, right click on it, and then choose to open or double click on it, and that will open it into the Steinberg Library Manager on your music PC, and then that will make kind of the connections there. Okay, so we have a question. I have an external instrument set to off in my template, but why is it when I load the template, I can still play it and have to render in real time? So anything that once you introduce like some different elements, for external effects and for external instruments, that will obviously have to be rendered in real time. So if so let's say if I have an external instrument in the template, so let's say I'll add an instrument track and I'll choose just an external instrument. And let's say I will choose to render just a part of it. I could come over here and let's see if it forces me into doing real time. Okay, so if it's not on, so let's see if we disable the track. So what you could try to do is to just, take the external instrument track, instead of turning it off, try to just right click and disable the track and then enable the track back. So try that, and that should allow you to be able to export with external instruments that will then not force you into real-time mode. Okay, so we just see from Sergey, I would very much like to see, the question is, I would very much like to see shadows from below at the track events. This would visually separate the tracks. So I think if you did shadows, that could be one of those things that, as you're doing it, could cause like unnecessary CPU usage. But as we see here, like all my tracks are, as we look at these, we could see kind of pretty clear delineations between them. So let's say if I just, with this particular line, I'll pass it along as input, but I I think that you could see that, but as you hover over, you could get an indication of what is currently actively hovered over by doing that. But I think that dark line between the tracks is pretty distinctive, but like I wouldn't blend these two tracks together with that separation line, but I'll pass it along as feedback. All right, just finding my spot, sorry. Okay, reading through comments. All right, so I just see a question. Does Cubase arrange marker things do stuff? So I'm not sure if you're asking about like a marker track, like let's say if I just take this, I'll just revert this project quickly. Okay, so does Cubase arrange marker things do stuff? So if you have your markers here, so let's say as we're playing, I could just come right over here and drop markers. Or if I wanted to select a range, I could add a cycle marker. While it's playing, we could just kind of drop markers in like so. So if that's what you mean by, so all right. So let me know if I'm misunderstanding that. So, on the does Cubase arrange marker things do stuff? So you could have your markers and then you could, navigate just by using the left and right arrows between markers. Or if you wanted to just select kind of a range between markers, you could do that as well by just going to the range tool and double clicking near the top. All right, so a question, how do I get the insert instrument window to stay on the screen after I click on something else, because it always disappears and becomes a tedious back and forth? All right, so if it's an instrument track, so let's say you said insert instrument. So if it's an instrument and let's say I'm here and I have like this open and I click here, and so if we right click on top, you'll see this always on top. So if I click here and then I, have to do this kind of shuffle between different windows when I make another window active. So with instruments or plugins, just try to come right click on the top. And at that point, you could just choose always on top. So now when I click somewhere else, this instrument won't, this window won't go in the background for you. Okay, so this Jay's question about the click track. Is it possible to have multi-sound 2 to 4 sounds custom click track? Would like to be able to emulate kick, snare, hat, etc. to more closely capture groove. If not, could it be requested? So yeah, if we come over here to our transport menu and go to metronome setup, at this point you could go to click sounds. So let's say as we're just kind of playing, let's say if we're just listening to our click track here. So we have kind of our normal click track. But if I wanted to change we go to the metronome setup, you go to your click sounds. So, you'll have a number of different presets. So if you wanted to, and if you wanted like a vintage spike, this is kind of like a typical Yuri click that some people will go for. But, for this, you could also just click on use custom sounds. And once you have your custom sounds preset, you could just come right over here and click into sound, and you could load in any sample that you want. So you could just have it be the typical Cubase click if you wanted to, and then you could also go to like the click pattern, so that once we're in 4/4 here, if you wanted to try different. So if you had to give different kind of rhythmic timings for different clicks, you could do that. So once again, just go to your transport menu to metronome setup, go to the click sounds, click on use custom sounds, and you could now just come over here and pick any samples that you want for your click drum, for your click track. Okay, reading through more comments. So you see Tim Weinheimer just saying, have I told you lately that I love Cubase? That's great. Thanks, Tim. That's great. Reading through more comments. Uno Momento wants people to smash the like button. And Jeff Skubowski saying he's smasher number 75. So that's great. Appreciate it. Okay, so we have a question. Why, when I'm importing the MIDI to Cubase, it was created VST instruments folder in Hallian Sonic SE and Hallian Sonic SE main, and why I can remove it if I just MIDI clips. Okay, so what you need to do, it's a preference. So if you come over here to your preferences, just choose under MIDI to MIDI file, and you'll see destination. So, and you could just choose instrument tracks versus Hallian Sonic SE multi-timbral. So many times when you drag MIDI files in, like from like a drum program or something like that, so, you know, often, you know, a vast majority of people use standard MIDI files for, like, you know, songs where you have, like, you know, general MIDI sounds in a MIDI file. So that will automatically just load up the general MIDI bank of Hallian Sonic SE. But if you don't want it to do that, just switch this preference here to instrument tracks or to MIDI tracks, and then it won't load that up. Now, if you imported a MIDI file and it's now, let's see if I have one on my desktop or something, and I'm just going to check the status of the preference. Okay, so let's say if I imported a MIDI file, may have one on. Okay, so I'll import a MIDI file. So now it's going to add the Hallian Sonic SE. To remove it, all you have to do is just come over here to the VSTi instruments. So you'll see on the right zone, and then we'll just come right over here and choose no VST instrument, and then it'll be removed from the project. Okay, so we see just a follow-up from a question from last week. So it says, this is from Alex Morgan. I'm so sorry, I made a mistake last week. I meant when the project background is white, if you select volume lane, you cannot see the line until a node is inserted, which point it goes to track color. So let me go ahead and switch my background. Okay, so all right, so it's, you know, as soon as you, so you can see where, like, you don't, let's say if I go to the guitar part here, so you don't see the node, and then we just switch this back. So this line, which is white by default, so I think it's just a white line, and then you don't necessarily see it until it's already in. I'll kind of pass that along. So let's say if I go to my overhead track and I wanted to, think you could see this, you know, this line here vertically. That's the current automation point. So let's say if I go to the fader, you know, it's more subtle, but we can see this horizontal line here. And you can see it move up and down below this track. So it's still visible. It's easier to be read as soon as it has the colors, but again, just kind of looking at it, we could see the vertical line indicated right here. So it doesn't stand out as much contrast. And I'll mention that to developers as well. I'll pass that along. And thanks for the clarification. Sorry if I misunderstood the last time you asked. All right, wonderful to see David M on the live stream. Okay, okay, so you see, let's see, question from Jay, working on a side project, are there currently tools, references, which convey approximately how percentage of high, mid, low end are lost on average of dissipated sound absorbed decayed transients? You know, one tool that, you know, may give you kind of a sense of that, you know, so let's take a look at, you know, like an interesting perspective on this, Jay, might be, you know, like as we're looking at, you know, is probably, if you're looking for kind of like an interesting perspective on that, it might be like just looking at it in spectral layers. So, you know, let's say if I just want it to come over here and we'll look at the bass, you know, and here we could see kind of the, you know, the waveform at top, but you could kind of just come over here and switch to, you know, like your 3D view of it as well. So, you know, this could be kind of, let me just, but, you know, here you could actually, you know, as you kind of, you know, get a sense for kind of reading the, you know, all of the, you know, the different views here, you know, after a while, this could give you kind of an interesting perspective utilizing the spectral layers to do, you know, to look at different material like that. Okay, Michael Teams wants people to whack the like button. All right, so great discussion on technology. Okay, so a question from Keith Young. Greg, could you please explain the message resolve missing audio files and what to do about it? Thank you. Excuse me. Using 1104 with old projects from Elements 9 and, of course, Cubase, how to stop the message appearing. So sometimes you may just get, let me see, I think I may have a project where you may have a message like that. Okay, so I think this one will generate the message. All right, so what that is it's indicating that there's audio files that are referenced in the pool, or that don't that aren't there. So we may get like a resolve missing files issue. And if you look for these files, and it could be that these are files that aren't being used in the project. So to get rid of it, what you could do is just go to your pool window, and you could just say remove unused media. So, and then resave, and then that you won't get the message the next time. So go to your pool window, and why that's doing it is because it's saying, okay, we saw that these files were referenced in the audio pool, meaning that they could be used in a project or were at one point used in the project, and they're not in the folder currently. So it just kind of give you a warning with that. So if you say, okay, my project is playing back with all the files as needed, go to your pool window, right click, and remove unused media and save. So we see question. Hi, Greg. Please tell how to change master meter levels. All right. So let's say if we're playing back a project and we wanted to look at the meters, so you could have different meter scales. So, if you want to see this as a plus 3 dB digital scale, plus 6 dB or plus 12 dB digital scale, or if you want to do CATS 20, 14. So, there will be different metering scale standards, and, Cubase can use a lot of them in the master meter here. Or if you wanted to do it in the SuperVision plugin. So if you want to be full digital scale where 0 is at the very top, or you want to have a 12 plus dB meter, you could just kind of change the meter scale directly there. So let me know if that's what you wanted to figure out. So that's how you could change the master meter levels. So, if you wanted to actually just change the, levels that are playing back, you could just adjust your master fader, and that will obviously adjust the levels. But if you want to see different meter scales, you could just kind of select right there. Okay, reading through comments. Okay, so we see from Jeff Sabelski, Greg, with tape noise reduction with Spectral layers extension innuendo, the rumble is around 20 hertz. Is that unique to magnetic tape, or will EQ cutting 60 dBs do the same thing as selecting and removing from Spectral layers at 20 hertz? You could do that, so I don't think it's anything that's unique to analog tape. Usually 20 hertz is pretty low to be captured effectively on analog tape. But if you do see it, and one thing that you could do to, help with that is, even if you take the channel EQ in Cubase, so let's say I'll just reset. So I'll just come over here and so let's say, if you wanted to be, very surgical about it. You know, you could get just kind of like your parametric EQ and say, okay, we're going to go to 20. And at that point, we'll turn on so you can actually see it. And then you could drop that. But, you know, even more surgical approach is that you could open up something like the inserts here and go to frequency. And with frequency, you could just choose the EQ type instead of peak to be notch. So we could say, okay, I want this to be at 20 hertz. And now we could say, okay, EQ2, we want to just, you know, come right over here and adjust, you know, and I'll just kind of move this up, but you could adjust kind of the Q to be very narrow, just at 20 hertz. And if you have Nuendo, I'll show one thing in Nuendo, Jeff, since I know you have Nuendo, but there's another plugin utility that's helpful with this called the post filter. And I know you took advantage this summer of doing the upgrade to Nuendo or the crossgrade. So we'll show you this plugin because sometimes you may have, you know, frequencies and kind of like the overtone series. And what this particular plugin can do is okay, so look under filter for the post filter, because you could now come over here and just say, okay, I wanted to put this in notch and say, okay, we want the frequency here to be 20, and I'll just kind of show this. And let's say, okay, I want that to be minus 24 dB, but you realize that you may have kind of an overtone series. So if you actually just kind of click here, this would now automatically take the overtone series and be able to kind of filter out the overtones from the original 20 hertz as well. So that's a very powerful tool for that type of work, Jeff. So, you know, check out those options of the frequency or the post filter plugin that you have inside your Nuendo. All right, so we just see from Clayton just saying, this is an awesome idea, live Q&A. Once I get my Cubase up and running, I'll be over here with legit questions. Yep, so hopefully it's helpful. So we'll try to help people get up and running, and this way you could actually get your questions answered. So we see a comment from John Costigan. My old MIDI files, Performer 3.1 and Mac Plus, have wild fluctuations in tempo. I'm amazed, but it seems so steady at the time. Cubase is like a Swiss watch in comparison. So yeah, a lot of the early MIDI stuff that, you know, people complained about as being too rigid was kind of all over the place, timing wise. So and kind of in that era, the Ataris were really good because we didn't, you know, the Ataris, the developers like Steinberg, and at the time eMagic, or before eMagic, C Lab, you know, could basically bypass the computer's operating system and deal with the MIDI timing. So Okay, we see JVI's on the live stream, just thanking us for the hangouts. So I'm glad they're helpful. And JVI just says, I want to say special thank you for the special guest you organized last Tuesday. Really appreciated that. Learned a lot. So yeah, it was great. And I think they want to be regular parts of the Zoom meetups. And Fred Corey, you know, is just a really wonderful composer and drummer and person. He's on these live streams a lot as well. So his wife recognizes my voice, he was telling me. Okay, from Michael Teams. Hi, Greg. How about showing how to bring in a reference track and setting it up for comparison to your mix? I'm still confused about the process. Thanks. Okay, so this is the project I usually use for this. So let's say, you know, we have, you know, a lot of times we have plugins on our master bus and realize that if we just, you know, take a wave file that's extracted from a CD, that wave file has already been mastered and processed. So if we take a song that's been mastered and we run it through like another set of like master effects processing, that often isn't a fair comparison. It makes what you're trying to use as a reference, you know, not an actual reference. So in this example, let's say I wanted to take this track and I'll just do like a really odd EQ on it. So let's say this is my reference track. So the goal is to not have this track go through my master fader. So I want this track to go through almost like an alternate. So it's not going through the processing. It's not going through the gain stage of the mixer. So I'm going to take this track, my reference track, and we're going to, instead of sending this to, I'll just do it with this one here. So instead of sending this to my master bus, I'm going to say we're going to send it to no bus. And we'll see Q sends here. So I'm going to activate a Q send. And we could do this in our audio menu or studio menu to studio connections. I'll go to my control room. And here I will just right click and add a Q. And I just call this Q reference. And we don't even have to have it connected anywhere. So what I want to do now is I'm just going to check my Q here. So we'll say, okay, so reference is going to be my first Q mix. So I'll take this file, sorry to make this more confusing, and we're going to, instead of sends, we're going to click on Q sends, turn this on, and set it to 0 dB. I will go to my control room. And so now this file, as it plays, is not going to my stereo out. It's just going into my control room for my Q mix. So at this point, I could play this project. Now when I click on C1, Q1, this is now, we're hearing the Q mix. So this could be our reference, and this is my mix. So I just did that, EQ'd it separately so you could distinguish. So I could take this track, is now only playing through the control room cues. So I click on C1, I hear the reference track, but none of the other tracks. And now I could hear that in comparison to my mix. So that's the reference track, and this is my mix. And, you know, set the faders at 0 dB, set the Q mix to 0 dB so we're not adding additional gain. And then you could just toggle back and forth between your reference tracks and the and your project. Okay, reading through. You're seeing discussion of listening to Ray Charles, and Stevie Wonder is always good. So I've been lucky enough to like sit on a piano next to Stevie Wonder while he's played and sang. So sitting on a piano bench with him, it was pretty cool. Okay. Okay, so I see a question. How do I make my final copy the loudest without going over the loudness units accepted for social sites like Spotify? You know, if we have let's say if I wanted to take like this file and I wanted to make sure that it was going to be kind of the perfect loudness level for working with, you know, for delivering to Spotify. I think their current loudness units that they look for is minus 14 LUFS. So if you go to audio, go to processes, you know, once you have your final mix, you know, and go to normalize. And then once we have this file selected, and we could just go here to normalize, and we could say loudness units, and we could just say, you know, minus 14. And that will, I'll just click on auto apply, and that will just take that mix down file and automatically generate it to minus 14 LUFS for you. So once again, you could just go to audio to processes and normalize, or you could just do it if you go to direct offline processing and choose processes here. And you could do this in peak dB or in loudness normal or in loudness units. So if you just do that, then that's an easy way you can kind of mix and then just kind of process the file at the end for the optimum levels that the different streaming platforms are using. All right, so I just see a question from Tracy Griffith. How many sounds do I have? So I'm not sure which version of Cubase you're using, but if you wanted to, you know, there's a number of ways to do it. If you kind of just look at your media bay, so let's say if you wanted to come over here and go to loops and samples. So, you know, let's see, I think if we go to like the large media bay, let's see if we could come over here and just say, if it shows the quantity. So let's say if I want to go to loop set, laser beams. see if it actually shows quantity somewhere, but you know, you're gonna have, you know, thousands and thousands of sounds, and you know, so you can get a sense also like looking at VST instruments. So let's say if we just come over here, you could, you know, just organize, let's say your VST instruments, and if you wanted to go to synth and go to Hallian Sonic SE, you know, that's all the sounds in that category, and you could go back. I could probably dig up exactly how many sounds if you really want to know the exact quantity, but if you could let us know exactly which version of Cubase that you have as well. Okay, so I see Dan Freeman's just emailed a couple of chord track questions, so I'll see if we can get them before the end of the live stream here. I see that Jazz Dude just posted the difference in between different versions. So you see Sable Winter saying we need a Cubase emoji, so that'd be good. I'll pass it along. You're so clever. See, Jay is just loves the overtone notch notes, so we just showed innuendo. See, David M is just from Liverpool saying Atari MIDI timing was so bob on. So yeah. All right, we see the Cubase Junkies made it. So great to have you on the live stream. Okay, so we see color coding by part in the editing window. Question is, what is the best way to deal with a couple of instruments that play the same notes so they are not visible by color as they are behind each other? Okay. All right, let me just... Okay, so we see color coding by part in the editing window. What is the best way to deal with a couple instruments that play the same notes so they are not visible by color, or they are behind each other? All right, so let's say if I, you know, one thing that you could do is sometimes, let's say, all right, so let's say if I look at these parts here, and I'll just do this in the key editor. Okay, so we're going to colorize by part. And they all kind of share the same event. So, all right, so what is the best way to deal with when a couple instruments play the same notes that are not visible by color? Okay, so, you know, if you wanted to, I think we could choose to edit active part only. So if I wanted to, you know, look at chords or synth, you know, this will make those notes kind of active. So say now, so, if we, so as soon as I just click here, so you can see that like these parts are sharing the chords. So when I come here and I make this active, so let's say the Rhodes, I could see all these, like these chords that are active in the Rhodes part. When I go to the chords part, this will immediately bring up the chords part that was underneath the Rhodes part here previously. But when we made this kind of the active part, at that point we could see that they're overlapping and one is kind of more kind of faded out, indicating that it is inactive. And if I choose the synth part, we could kind of see the synth part kind of overlap between the two. So you could just kind of pick and choose just right here, and there's a key command that you could set up to go to next part. And at that point you could, even though they are the same color, you could see the distinction between that the other colors kind of get faded out. So, and let's say if I just come here, so as you work with that, and we could choose to edit the active part only so that you don't, inadvertently or accidentally move that. But at this point, when you do this, notes that are underneath will maintain the color, and the other ones, will just kind of show those colors faded. So let me know if that makes sense for you. So JVI saying, yeah, my kids also recognize your voice, Greg. So yeah, I guess I'm on a lot of households. Okay, so we have a question. Please, how can I install VST sound collection in Cubase? So once you have it downloaded, all you need to do is right-click on the file itself. And, if you right-click on the file or control-click on Mac, if you have a single mouse button operation, and just open it in the Steinberg Library Manager, and then it will make the connection there. So as soon as you have the .vst sound, so I'll just come over here real quick. Let's look for it. So wherever you had it downloaded to. So all you have to do is double click to open, or open with Steinberg Library Manager, and that will automatically make that connection for you. And it will become visible in Cubase. All right, so we see Jean-Marie Horvat on the live stream. It's great to see you. And he's saying, I'm a stud. I'm no Jean-Marie, so I can only hope. But wonderful that you could join us, and it was great talking with you the other day. I don't know if I'm trying to remember if it was Wednesday or Thursday. So, but great to see you, and thanks for joining our live stream. And check out Jean-Marie's credits. He's worked on all sorts of amazing records. So we see from Jeff Sabelski, fantastic, Greg. Both those plugins I haven't accessed yet. Now that hundreds of hours of tapes have been transferred, low frequency of rumble may cause compression when unwanted frequency and post filter. Thanks. Yeah. All right, reading through comments. Let's see, John Costigan's been granted eggnog ice cream. Michael's already inspired by the change of weather for fall. So I guess I could skip my company birthday party sing along for today. So we see a comment, Cubase is like a game that never ends. That's an interesting description. Okay, reading through more comments. We're seeing Jeff Spelsky saying he watched Stevie Wonder on Ed Sullivan with his mom. So, yeah, he's just amazing. His voice is just stunning. All right, so we see Faces Wherever. Just the Luff's lessons were perfect for him. All right, so Dan Freeman saying, wow, that reference track comparison option is fantastic. Wish I could hit like more than once. All right, so we're seeing Clayton just that he has a Cubase LE code. So if you have that, you could definitely, activate the code right now, and then you could, have the latest version, even if it's kind of a code from years ago. If you haven't activated it yet, it will just simply activate to the latest, most current version. So we see just a question from Jay. Can Spectral layers extract data / percentages to spreadsheets and or run formulas functions possibly for as user defined presets? So I'm not like the worldwide expert in Spectral layers, but I don't think that it's able to kind of generate anything that would be kind of read via a spreadsheet. It's going to be more, for, very specific, intense, audio editing and kind of, investigational audio, which used to be called forensic audio. So stuff like that is really its main purpose. All right. Wonderful to see that Mandy Lane was able to make the live stream. Thanks for joining. Okay, reading through, we're seeing people wanting ghost notes. I'll pass that along again. Okay, so we see a question. Hi, Greg. I'd like to do more editing in place. Any suggestions for speeding this up to save me doing it in the lower zone? Thanks. So I used to do a lot of editing in place. So one is just to make sure that you know the keyboard shortcut. I think it's Control or Command Shift I that will open it up. So if I have that track selected, so this will allow you to open up kind of basically the MIDI editor directly in the project window. So this could negate the need for this. So knowing that the keyboard shortcut is there, you could also just right click and see that when you go to track control settings, that there is an edit in place icon. It's probably hidden. So if you have it if you right click and go to, like just, make sure that it's in the visible features. And that way you could always just kind of come here. One thing that's, I think if we hold down, let me see if I get the modifier. So if you just wanted to kind of navigate up and down, and I'm trying to remember and if we go to the left and right, that will allow you to kind of zoom like from the MIDI keyboard. So if you needed to just kind of look at it. Now, one thing that's kind of interesting that you could do with the in-place editor is have access to the range tools. So let's say if I wanted to just grab my range selection tool here, and I wanted to select like that range in time, and I wanted to duplicate it, but with the space before and after, I can now just come here and just hit Control or Command D and duplicate it. So, a lot of people miss how to navigate and how to kind of zoom. So, up, down to navigate, and to zoom, move it left to right. So those are some things, and make sure you know the keyboard shortcut, but that could really, speed up workflow, pretty easily. Okay, just reading through more comments. All right, so we have Vince Lewis checking in from South Africa. So says question, I realize it functions 100% as intended, but in control room, is there any way to hear both A and B speakers at the same time? As I said, I understood it was built that way to choose and compare. Trying to think if there's any workarounds that might enable you to hear both of them combined. One thing you might be able to try to do out of curiosity, something is coming over here and say go to your audio connections. I haven't tried this, but when you go to add, let's say a speaker, let me just remove this. Is you can go to add a monitor instead of stereo. Try doing it, as quadraphonic. And if you there's a preference here. Once you go to control room for exclusive device ports in monitor channels, uncheck that preference. And then I think you might be able, this is kind of worth a try, but you could, you know, maybe just take the 4 outputs and connect it there. And then when you go to monitor 4, it may send it out. So I don't know if that will have to take an effect into panning, but that's something that you might be able to try. So, but yeah, the intention is to kind of switch between the different monitor sources. All right. Okay, so we see, hi Greg, I have a trial of Spectral errors. If I alter a project with this trial version, will it still be able to access the changes after the trial has expired? Do I render the audio? So I would try to render the audio, because I think once the trial expires that you won't be, you know, it won't turn on. So if you wanted to utilize that during the trial version, I would probably render those particular versions. Render those particular files. Okay, so let's say we see a question: when playing with automatic quantizing, how to set it so every note is played on a grid, whether it's 1/8, 1/16, etc. Okay. Okay, so let's say. Just make this a little louder. Okay, so let's say I wanted to do, so I come here, I'm going to activate auto quantize, and we're going to set the quantize value here to 1/8 notes. So I will drop my tempo down just a bit here. So let's say let's say I wanted to record, and I'll just, so I'm just going to go and just select this track. All right, so now I'm just going to randomly play. All right. I think I send it some MIDI message. Let me just, that mutes. Okay, so when I come here, let's say, okay, I want to now just record. And I want to do auto quantize to 1/8 note. So we're going to play. So I hear my click, and I'm just going to, let me just, think I just have my, I'll try a different note here real quick. I'll just do it on a new project. All right, so I'm gonna come over here and we have my quantized value set to 1/8 notes. And now what I want to do is we're gonna just record. And I'll just, all right, so at this point I recorded just a whole series of notes, and when I go to look in the editor, it's all going to play back just straight 1/8 notes. So as we do this, because I hit auto apply. Now, if I wanted to, so that's automatically going to be on the grid. And if I wanted to go to the edit and let's go to reset quantize, you could see what I actually played in versus what was actually, so if we undo the reset quantize here, we can see everything is just going to be straight to 1/8 notes. So, and if you wanted to choose the values to be straight to 16th notes or quarter notes, so let's make it quarters. So as I go to record and auto quantize is enabled, so when I go to look at it, now everything's going to be right on the grid. But if we, again, reset the quantize, it'll just play back just like that. So once you enable the auto quantize, that will just automatically kind of place it on the grid that you choose based on the quantization value. All right, so you just see, I don't know, but what if you could move the sample browser to the left? So this will be kind of fixed to the right zone, but if you wanted to have your media bay up here, or you could just set up, let's say, a loop browser. And if you wanted to have that functionality just on the left-hand side, you could arrange the windows accordingly and save it as a workspace. So you could have that on the left-hand side. Okay, reading through more comments and questions. Thanks for all the great questions. If you learned something new, make sure that you do hit the like button. All right, so question, I was working on cleaning old tape recordings using Spectral Layers Pro 7. I wanted to use Spectral Layers twice, but that wasn't possible. Is that correct? So I think you could run one instance of it, but if you wanted to, let's say if we come over here, you know, like some of the, like if you're doing restoration work, so let's say if I come here and I go to my extensions, and go to the spectral layers. So let's say, you know, if I like if I'm doing, more restoration stuff, I could come over here and say, okay, I want it to, let's say I found like noise profile, and I filter this out. So let's say I registered a noise and then I do a noise reduction, that a lot of times you could just, come over here. Let's say I run that. And then you could run kind of this same function again. So let's say, okay, so I would just come over here to noise reduction. And then you could do multiple passes on the same functions. But I think once you kind of go into the extension, you could have one instance of it. You could render, do a bounce selection and then, render it again if you needed to. But just kind of, you might be able to just, have that kind of automatically, do multiple passes on it if needed. Okay, reading through comments. All right, so we have Joseph checking in from Nigeria. Thanks for joining the live stream. Okay, reading through more. So seeing some discussion using the quadraphonic. So yeah, you have to be careful with panning maybe, and there could be like audio interfaces that have a, like a little mixer app that you could send, where you might be able to double up the outputs as well. So just CJ mentioned, until now, I didn't even know the non-exclusive was an option in reviewing this video with the next week. I think that I absorbed more this week than ever. That's great. Yeah, so that's helpful, especially if you're using like maybe speakers in a 5.1 and a stereo and a mono configuration. So in my personal studio, I have like stereo monitors and a 5.1 set up, and I take the left and right of my 5.1 as an alternate stereo, and I take the center channel as a mono. So I have kind of multiple monitor configurations with kind of a 5.1 and a stereo speaker. Okay. All right. So we have a question. Greg, what's the difference between workspace and configuration functions, and when and how to use them? Thanks again. So, the workspace, so, once we come over here, so a lot of times you may find yourself, it's like, okay, let's say like I wanted to have my loop browser on the left and I didn't want anything on the right. So I wanted my project window and my loop browser set up here. So it's just kind of what Mandy asked for, some similar functionality like this. Okay, so I get all these windows set up. What I could do now is save a workspace. So I can add a workspace. Now we can have workspaces that are going to be tied to a project or globally. So we'll just call this Mandy. All right, so now I wanted to have a workspace. So instead of having to close this window, move these windows around, like I should be able to go to a main workspace. So let's say if I have this set up, and let's say if I go to Mandy's workspace, that allows me to have different window views that will kind of always be tied together. So, and I could also just say, okay, I want to see like this particular plugin open. I think I may have changed my plugin configurations. So, you know, these workspaces, you know, they could be updated. You can organize them. You could have different keyboard shortcuts to recall them. So if you find yourself like juggling windows, and of course in, you know, DAW program, regardless of how single window you try to get it, there's just a myriad of windows and windows and windows, and arranging them how you see fit is what Workspaces will allow you to do. So. All right, great to see Daryl has made a live stream. See, the Dan Freeman's just saying he's a recovering perfectionist. So that's a great way to put it. All right, so I just see Dan saying, a friend who got me into Cubase has struggled with an electric hum when recording playing his guitar at home and can't resolve it. I tried Waves to remove it, but now there's spectral errors. So yeah, it's great for that as well. All right, so I think I'm at the end of the questions so far. So let me jump over to some of our questions that were emailed in. Thanks for all the great discussion. Okay. All right. So last week, Pablo had asked about how to utilize the side chaining features of SuperVision, and I kind of played with it during the week. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. Okay, so many of us know that we could look at spectral layers here. So let's say, or I'm sorry, not spectral layers, but SuperVision. So let's say, so I'm going to go to the control room and I'll just have this as my, so let's say I'll just want to look at, so I want to look at phase of different tracks. So I'll just say, okay, we're going to have phase scope here and a phase scope at the top. So when I could now just come over here and we could add a sidechain input. So let's say, where we look for like, phasing issues, maybe kind of with, different sources. So let's say I want to look at my overall phase in this stereo bus, but in here, I wanted to actually, I'll just even start with just frequencies, just to make it a little more obvious here. So okay, so let's say I want to go to my spectrum bar. So I can see my spectrum bar here. And let's say if I wanted to add another spectrum bar at the bottom. So I'll just come over here, let's say your spectrum bar here. But now what I want to do is to take this spectrum bar, and I wanted this to sidechain input from just our kick drum. So now when I select this, I'll activate the sidechain. I'll come here, and now I could just look at the mix down of this sidechain. So this is just going to be my kick frequencies versus everything else. So this way I could compare kind of one track's tonal frequencies, or even if we wanted this to be phase. So we say, okay, let's do a phase scope. And again, I just want to check the phase of the entire mix versus the kick drum. So I'll just come right over here and we'll say, okay, we want to do our side chain. So I could look at, just individual elements and do that for each of the different frequencies, for different tracks. So if I was looking for something that might be causing phase anomalies, or something that was, being like, conflicting with different frequencies. So once you have like two of the same setup, just come over here to level, and then if you wanted to, see the level on both of these. And this one is just going to be the sidechain input of the mix down of the sidechain input. We could do that. And something else you could do, which is kind of cool, is also, let's say if I want this to be my normal, I could also choose for this to be just the left channel of my stereo mix, if I wanted to, or if I wanted to be the mid, and this would be my left and right. So the sidechain will allow us to take like this, the same meters and look at individual channels, or to look at it in context of a mix as well. All right, so we had next question. This came up via Facebook. So how to use Hitpoints to create warp markers in an audio event. So when I come over here, I'm just going to go to, right, so we had this. Okay, so let's say I wanted to, let me get the right project here, sorry about that. Okay, let me just All right, so let's say if I wanted to, and the question was, I think the discussion kind of came up and saw us on the Facebook group, but as soon as we go into, let's say, our sample editor and we start doing free warping, that what they noticed was as soon as they, they say, okay, I want to move this, that all the events afterward, their timing was affected too. So they would have to kind of find the next point and manually enter in these values so that they could move this without affecting the rhythmic values of those things. So that was kind of the question, is how to populate the warp markers. So an easy way to do that is once we double click, we could go to our hit points. We could just adjust our hit points accordingly. So let's say, okay, we're going to adjust the threshold of our hit points. And as we do that, we'll just say create warp markers. So now we go to our audio warp tab and go to free warp. And now these are all populated so that you could just kind of move without having to set the warp markers after the fact. And we also had another question in regards to this, is if you wanted to get rid of all the warp markers to manually add them in, how do you do that? And that's just from the audio warp tab, just under free warp, just click on reset. And then you could kind of start all from square one. All right, so we had a question sent in from Alexander from Russia, I believe, so from Moscow. So the question is, does Chord Assistant work on chord pads? If so, how? And can you answer how to build chords in chord pads Assistant, like the chord track? Want to learn more about chord pads, please. Okay, so when we deal with a chord track, so I'm going to add a chord track here. And let's say I'm putting in a lovely chord progression. Okay, so let's say I have this as my chord progression, and the Chord Assistant, what it's intended to do is to not only just kind of give you chords, but the intention of the Chord Assistant is for it to look in context of the chord progression, and and a lot to do with the chord before and a chord after, and suggest chords based on that. So it's not necessarily generating chords just randomly, but it's looking at, the specific sequence. So when I go to my Chord Assistant, I could come over here and we could choose, okay, I want it to be based on common notes or based on cadence. So at this point, and we could actually give it different levels of complexity if we wanted to. So we can say, okay, I want it to be very simple. So we can say, an F sharp minor is a good chord between, A to G, or a C sharp minor is a good transition chord, or an A, So we could just come over here and that suggests the chords between, that fits between those two particular chords, what's before and what's after it. When we work with the chord pads aren't necessarily set up so that, as we're playing them, that, it's going to be in any particular order. So these are just access to chords. So I'll just set up a quick sound just to listen to it. So okay, so when I go to so here we could, play these chords, but it could really be in any order. So, you know, the D is on D minor. That may not be the second most popular chord that's next to it. You know, it could probably be. So these aren't necessarily tied in. So when we go to, you know, add a chord, you know, one of the things that you could do is come over here and just say assign pads from the chord track. And now we could just come over here and so I could just play these chords. Now, if I wanted to, you know, create my own chords, I could come right over here and just say, okay. And now I would hit enter, and, you know, you could just define your chords just by, you know, coming right there. And that way we could say, okay. Now, also, you know, like if we want to see this, you know, to get maybe different chord ideas and have it be with kind of a perspective, if we wanted to come over here, we could just say, you know, I want to, as you come over here, if you click on this, here we could see the chord progressions over in D. The chords that are visually closer, I could say, okay, I just wanted to assign that, you know, to that particular chord pad. We could do, you know, that kind of very easily just from, okay, I just wanted to come here. Let's say, okay, let's select this chord, and okay, that could be a far away chord. But at this point, it doesn't have the chord assistant because, and we could also look at it in circle fifths, which is very typical for like doing maybe like a jazz progression. So you'll say, okay, I want to come here. So you may go through kind of a circle of fifths and do a turnaround. And that's very commonly used in jazz music. But, you know, when we do the chord pads, it's not, again, really intended for, you know, having, you know, the chords that are determined before and after, because the order of the chord pads isn't really, you know, dependent upon. When we have the chord assistant, that's trying to figure out the chord to go between two existing chords. Like if you're just kind of stuck and maybe you're in a bit of a creative rut, you know, it's like, oh, what's the perfect chord? Give me an idea. But it looks in context of the song, whereas these chords and the chord pad will always just kind of always be available and not necessarily, you know, restrict it to the context. So that's why you don't see a chord assistant. But if you wanted to experiment, you know, just come over here. You can see a chord assistant here, but it doesn't really take into effect, like, you know, the progression. Okay, so we just see, hi, I have many presets for various instruments I created myself for contact, serum, etc. So I want to browse through all these file types in media browser, loops, samples, my own created, contacted, serum, presets, etc. and directly drag and drop them from media browser to a VSTi. So I think now that contact, I'm not sure if serum, I don't have serum, but you know, most of these, you know, if it's kind of set up in, I know, you know, there's VST3 presets that will allow you to do this. So if I wanted to come over here and I have a Hallian Sonic instance that I could now just come right over here and drag and drop that particular sound in that preset into like that file. So I can say, oh, I just wanted to come to the lute sound, and I wanted that, and that would automatically change the sound. So I think the Contact, and I'm not familiar with Serum, unfortunately, but I'm not sure if they use that same hierarchy or they have their own structure for presets. So I don't, my inclination is to say that you probably wouldn't be able to kind of drag and drop unless, Native Instruments or the company who makes Serum actually allow you to do that. So even though it's part of the VST3 specification, not all companies use those presets to do that with. But audio files, definitely. But the actual synth presets, I don't think that you'll be able to do it because they're utilizing a different architecture. Okay, so all right, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. I'm writing from New Jersey and hoping you and yours are well. We were doing great. Thank you for asking. I just bought Dorico Elements, which look like it doesn't export MIDI. If I export a piece as players and wave, will it import into Cubase Pro as separate tracks? Will an XML import into the score editor as separate part stave? So I'm pretty sure that Dorico Elements will do it. Let me see. Let me just. Okay, so I'll go ahead and start Dorico Elements here. So I thought that it did export a MIDI file, but we'll find out. Okay, so I'll just open this project here. So here we could just export MIDI. I will save it to desktop. All right, and now let's come over here to Cubase. So let's import the MIDI file. Let me make sure what file name I did. Okay, I'll just look in my recents. Okay, so here's, okay. And right there. So I could just see the MIDI information directly there. So you can export directly from Dorico. So then I see will an XML export import into the score editor as separate parts. So yes, it will in staves. If so, how much tweaking should I do to continue working on a piece in Cubase? So it could really depend, like you may not have to do a lot of tweaking, if it's depending on the material, like if you're doing maybe something that you wanted to specifically add like a swing playback feel to, or you wanted to make it sound less mechanical and add more, expression, you could do that, but you may not have to do too much with that. So, but you can definitely just export a MIDI file from Dorico right in. So, and Dorico Elements. Okay. Okay, so I just see a question. Hi, I have a very powerful computer that is more or less idle and exporting, so I end up having to wait a long time during each export. When using Adobe products, the core is more utilized more effectively. I was hoping that the newer versions of Cubase would utilize the core of a PC more effectively like Adobe products do without having to make any modifications from the fresh install. Many thanks for your assistance. So, if it's going to be like the video programs, that's going to how video programs utilize multi-core capabilities versus audio programs. They're kind of very apples and oranges. So it doesn't really make sense. One thing that you could probably do to speed up like, your export audio mix down is, before you do, I've seen some people will just raise their buffer before they do the export audio mix down. That could utilize, that could speed up the export length. And as you're working with it also, realize that a lot of times, we use plugins and many plugins don't utilize multiple cores. So if you have, like one sampler plugin with 10, instruments loaded in it, that could be utilizing that one plugin could be utilizing only one CPU core, where if you had 10 instruments with one sound each, so if you have 10 instruments with one sound versus one instrument with 10 sounds, that can make a big difference in how it allocates and shares resources across multiple cores. So if you're comparing it to video, it's probably, not a good analogy, but, just so those are a couple of things that you could try to make things a little easier. Okay, so we had a question. Sometimes when I open an event in the lower editor and choose VariAudio and select Elastic Pro Format Pitch, I get this message before I even turn on the musical mode part, and every time I open the part or create a free warp marker, it comes up again. I've noticed this on 2 bass tracks in different projects for sure, and possible other events. What gives? So once you're doing VariAudio, VariAudio is really tied to, a particular algorithm. So, because VariAudio is going to do its detection, its pitch detection, all that's going to be based on the solo algorithm. So when you get a message that, you need to come over here. So let's say I have this in Elastic Pro time and I go to VariAudio, you may just get a message and you'll notice that it will probably switch the playback algorithm. So as you do, when you start doing, the VariAudio editing, that it will, often just switch to the algorithm that VariAudio was designed and coded around for all the pitch detection. So that's why you get the message that it's, switching algorithms. Okay, and we got this from Taylor this morning. It says, I'm having an issue exporting a score. When I try to export this one in both Cubase 1102 and 10.5, it won't allow me to enter any information in a file name or file type fields. The only workaround I was able to do is take a screenshot of each page, place them into a Word document, and convert it to a PDF to send out to my guitar player. And I've attached a project if you could test it and see what's happening. If you cannot receive attachments, but okay, so let's take a look at Taylor's file. I think I still might have it saved somewhere. So let's go here. All right, so this was Taylor's chart. So let's say if I want to come in and let's go to the score editor. So I didn't have any problems with your file, and I emailed you, Taylor. I don't know if I gotten a response yet back during the live stream, but when I go into the score editor, okay, so now that I'm here, okay, and I will go and make sure that we are in page mode. And when I go to export, and I think this looked a little, I'm going to try to open it again from, just to make sure I have the same things. I think I may have saved it differently. See if this is. That's different projects. Sorry. Let me see if it's still in my downloads folder. All right, so let's say when I go to look at the chord chart here, and we'll go to our score view. All right, so we have our chord charts here. We see like, you know, chorus, bridge, etc. indicated. So, so I just want to make sure that when you go, you know, let's say we export the scores view, you know, and you said that you couldn't select, you know, I could type freely in and select the different formats here. You know, I know we had this discussion previously, Taylor, about, you know, this only doing kind of one page at a time. And I think when we do the export, it's really, as opposed to like printing through a PDF, that, you know, this export is really intended for, you know, taking it into like a desktop publishing application, which a lot of people use, like stuff like for InDesign to add other different elements. But, you know, so let me know. But it seems like when I go to export to score, that it's able to type in the field as well as select different values quite easily there. Okay, and I think we may have had a couple of questions that were emailed in during the live stream. Let's see if we can get to some of those. Thanks for all the great questions. Okay. Okay, so I see from Dan Bateman. Let's see if we can go through this. Thanks for all you do. I've tried this option a lot with no chord symbols are created. I don't know a scale, so maybe I'm doing something different than a scale that's selected somewhere. The function worked for my green MIDI events, but not the red ones. I think the root chords are pretty simple. All right, so D sharp, C sharp, A sharp. Okay, not sure why I don't get the chord symbols. Let me see if there's... I can open this up. It's a file I think that's attached. Okay, I may have to look at that after. Let's see. Maybe on Tuesday's live stream, I'll take a look at the file. Let's see if there's... Okay, and I see a song sent over, seeing if I could emulate a sound, so I could take a look, listen to that over the weekend, so I could listen to it a little more in depth. All right, so I'm going to go back to our chat discussion. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. So let's go ahead and jump back to our live chat and find my spot. Okay, so I see a question from Jay. Did I by chance miss your answer regarding sharing how you would go about importing a library of third-party sounds into instruments? So Jay, if you could let me know like which instruments, and if it's third-party sounds into like Cubase instruments, you know, but generally if you bought like, let's say an expansion pack for like Padshop or Retrolog, and just to make sure I'm reading this right. So importing a library of third-party sounds into instruments, but it's really just, you know, once it's installed, you know, just going into, if you know, once you have the program, you know, if you have like the .vst sound file, is just, you know, finding that VST sound file. And get my keyboard on the right computer. And then at that point, just, you know, you could double click to open it or open it in the Steinberg Library Manager. And then, so let's say if I like I got some of the Gary Gibbons online music foundry stuff for Padshop. I would just kind of come over here, and then you would see all of the different libraries here. So if you wanted to take advantage of, you know, different libraries like that, so they'll all show up right there. So, but Jay, if you could let me know if it's, you know, with Steinberg instruments or with other third-party plugins, but they will all just kind of show up right here. So if I go to my VST instruments and I want to go to Hallian Sonic SE, and I say, oh, okay, I just want to come over here and I want to go to Chris St. Aubyn's Simple, you know, I could just come right over there and see all those presets right there. Okay, so we have a question. Why does old Cubase projects want to load third-party plugin without losing all the settings? Like if you use FabFilter Q2 and now have FabFilter Q3, I lose all my EQ settings. How to recall settings? So what a lot of companies do to to have this not be an issue is to keep the same plugin name. So we've done it before, where plugins that are updated, if the project refers to this particular plugin, and the newer version has like all the same features, but a new name with additional features, that the plugins can be written so that the plugin will automatically load the next generation plugin. And it's really up to the plugin developer whether it works that way or not. So it's kind of out of our control. If they're two different names, it's two different names, and it's, when you go to load up a FabFilter Q2, it's not going to load up a FabFilter Q3, but the plugin developers can make it so that when it loads up a FabFilter plugin, that it goes into the latest version. So it's really up to the plugin developer to support that functionality, and not us to do it for them. So plenty of companies do it, including us. All right. So you just see the major concern I have with a lot of Cubase updates is they always add more plugins as part of the upgrade. Most of us already own these plugins in third-party form. I don't think it should be a major concern. A lot of people find, that, one of the issues that people complain about, that we hear a lot, just like you're talking about, like on our previous question about, FabFilter Q2 not carrying over to FabFilter Q3, but also different plugins may not be compatible for new operating systems, new computer processors. So, once you have those plugins, it's a separate team that does plugins and does sound. It's, like a lot of people tend to, like Squasher is a great example. People were using other types of plugins for Squasher, and now they really like Squasher, and they like the flexibility that it has. And they know that once it's updated, that, it'll work with the next version of Cubase, where that may not be the case with other plugins. So, and if you don't want to use those plugins, you're not forced to. It's not like you can't, when we introduce a new plugin, we don't cut off, functionality for something that's a multi-band up-down compressor to work in Cubase. So it shouldn't really, be a workflow hindrance at all. So we just want to offer more capabilities for our customers. Okay, so we just see, Greg, how do you restore files from trash of the pool? Why is it not a restore file or something like that? Okay, so let's take a look. Let's go to our pool window. So if I have something in the trash, I think all you have to do, let's say if I select these files, let's see if it's a right click. I think if you even just, let's see if we could drag it out of the pool, where it's a two-step process. See, we can add. I think there is like a little trick. I'm probably having a brain cramp on it. just do it on a new project here. Okay, so I'll just record. Okay, so we'll go to our pool window. Say I deleted that. It's now in trash. Sure, just having a brain cramp moment here. Okay, so all you have to do is select, and drag it up into the audio folder. So let's see if we could go back. I'll close this project. All right, so I have all of these. I'm gonna close this folder. Say I just have these files. So, but it looked like, we could just drag it into the audio folder. These files may not be here. Let's maybe try one at a time. So I think, this could be a locked folder. Oh, okay, because I don't have any files. So this file where they're all missing. So just do it when you do a new project. All right, so let's record. Okay, and so now we go to our pool window. We erase this file. Go to your pool window. It's here in the trash, and you could just drag it to the audio folder. Sorry, it took me a while to get there. I realized that I didn't have any audio files from that project I had opened previously. So. Okay, so we have a question. Greg, and my other question is about the editor. Can we visualize? Sorry, just Chatfield jumped. Can we visualize, can we visualize a MIDI and audio wave at the same time on two different tracks? I think that could be useful to match the timing to perfect, to match the time warp of perfect timing. So, you can do this on the project window, just like we showed a little bit earlier, especially with like the in-place editor. So if you wanted to, let's take a look at this file here. So if we wanted to, have this kind of laid out for you, we could, at this point, just look at it in the, we don't have kind of like a editor that will show both, but, you could come over here and very easily on the timeline. And if we wanted to, you know, at that point, you could get a pretty direct correlation to kind of what's going on between the MIDI and audio. Okay, just reading through comments. Okay, reading through more, see some discussion of acid jazz and Frank Zappa. All right, so we just see a big thanks to you, Greg. Can Dorico or Cubase transcribe audio in real time? So it doesn't do it in real time, but you can do it as kind of like an offline process through VariAudio. So if you wanted to come here into VariAudio, you could, and this will work for kind of a monophonic audio part, but we could go to your functions and at this point extract MIDI from the audio. So Dorico doesn't have that functionality, but Cubase does. So all right, so we see Daryl just says he has some specific questions pertaining to Dorico. I don't want to interrupt the Cubase flow with them. Where can I go to ask these questions? So if you want to send me the questions, Daryl, I'll be happy to show them on Tuesday's live stream. But there is a monthly live stream, a Dorico hangout as well that my colleague John Barron hosts. So there is a monthly Dorico live stream as well, and that's always a great resource. It's a Discover Dorico series, and you could see it on the Dorico. If you go to youtube.com/Dorico, and John Barron is wonderful with, answering questions. But if you want to send them to me, I'd be happy to show them for Tuesday's live stream. We see Jazz Dude on top of moderation, so. We appreciate that, Jazz Dude. All right, so reading through more comments. Okay, reading through more comments. Thanks for all the great discussion. All right, so we see from Sable Winters, is it okay if I create a Cubase emoji for chat? Sure. Yeah, you just have to share it with me, though. That's all. So that'd be wonderful. Thank you. All right, so just seeing. All right, so we just seeing a couple questions from Daryl, just saying in the learning assignments, there's a chord where the bottom two notes, and I think this is Dorico bass, so let's see if we could jump over real quick and see if we could do these quickly. Okay, so I just saying from Daryl, in one of my learning assignments, there's a chord where the bottom two notes are quarters and the top note is 2/8. Okay, so let's say I will just come. So if sometimes with this, Daryl, you may have to, let me just put in a quick meter here. Okay, so we'll just come over here and say, okay, we want to put in quarter notes. All right, so I'm going to put it into chord mode. Okay, so I think you said that the, all right, so sometimes when you do this, Daryl, I think if you just hit, you could go into voicing mode. I haven't done this in a while, sorry. I think it's like Shift V. We just, hang on just 1 second. I'm just going to review real quick. Okay, so if we wanted to go to right, we could just come over here and create voice as well. And then I think if you just kind of all right, so let's say we're here. So what you want to do is basically if you know, because it's may not be a chord, but you probably just need to come over here, Daryl, and just say, next voice. And let me just, but yeah, try just doing new voice from there, because it's probably not going to be considered a chord. But if you do a new voice, at that point you can see you could import, you could have the eighth notes at the top as well as the quarter notes. All right, and I see each time I insert, is from Daryl, each time I insert the eighth notes, the 2 quarter notes changes to 2 eighth notes as well. So let's say if I just wanted to put in, just put my caret here. So let's say I'll put in eighth notes. I'm just going to take it. Okay, hang on a second. Let me just, I'm going to take it out of chord mode here. So let's say, okay. Okay, so let's see. Each time I insert the eighth notes, the 2 quarter notes changes to 2 eighth notes as well. So you might be in insert mode. So, so let's say we insert 2 eighth notes here. So I will just put it into insert mode. And let's switch to eighth notes. So if you have the note selected, you may notice that it will, it will just kind of insert. So check your insert mode there, Daryl. Okay, so I just see from Dan Freeman, would it be handy to have a checkbox on the export window for when finished open mixdown file location? So let's jump back to Cubase. Okay, so let's... So I could pass that along. So a lot of times, people will put it automatically into a particular folder, like a mixdown folder. But I could see where it can make sense to automatically navigate to the particular location. So yeah, it doesn't do that automatically, but I can see where that can make sense. All right, so I just see guys or Greg, how about the Steinberg UR816? So it's a wonderful sounding interface. So parts on that are getting hard to find because of different fires at component factories. So if you still have access to get one, it's a wonderful interface, and it's a great price point as well. Okay, so I just see a question. How can I get the Zoom link? So, the Zoom link, we generally do the last meeting of the month. We'll do a 2-hour live stream and a 2 or 3.5 hour Zoom meetup with everyone. So we will, and we'll, probably towards the end of the month, like a week before the last live stream. So that would be, I think, October 22nd. We will probably I'll just put together a link, and you could email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, and I'll be happy to share the Zoom link. It's always wonderful. We'll try to have some other special guests as well, so I'll reach out to some friends. All right, so we have a question. Can anyone handle the stereo combined panner if it is narrow? I cannot pan it. It is nearly every time spreading or narrowing instead. Okay, so let's take a look. Okay, so say I'm in my combined panner. So say if when it's in narrow mode, so if you just kind of, you know, as long as you click in that area, you could just move straight up or down. You know, with the mouse, you could also just click on the edit channel settings if you wanted to and have a bigger view of that while leaving your mix console narrow. Okay, so you see a question from Michael Teams. I have a song that has all the files missing, every one of them. Then I go to where it says they are not there either. So it could be that when you had all of the audio files, maybe the audio files folder was moved and the project is still referencing the audio files that were in the original position. So you could check this, Michael, by going into your pool window and just kind of checking the path. And, you could just make sure that that path is where the audio files are, because it could be referencing a path that doesn't exist, or if, especially if the audio files folder was moved. So we see from JBI that B, someone loved this song. So it's another Vince Melmed hit. Vince who was in the Zoom meetup on Tuesday, he wrote that one as well. So. All right, we see that Gareth has finally made it to the live stream, so it's all better now. Thanks for joining, Gareth. Don't forget to hit the like button. And thanks for bitmojoing me. All right, and I see a tune is going to be coming my way, so that'd be great. Looking forward to playing bass on it. Okay, just reading through comments. So we see from Sable Winters, thanks for inviting Vince Melmed to the Zoom. So yeah, it was great. So I'm glad that hopefully you'll be able to record his song. So. We see from Nick, note to self, stop clicking on Greg's screen. It won't work. So it'll be next version of YouTube where everyone could take control of my computer from the live stream. we got a couple minutes left, maybe 1 or 2 minutes. Try not to go over. See, there's one last minute question before we wrap up. Okay, so it looks like we reached the end. So I will go ahead and we'll wrap up a minute early. I want to thank everyone for all the wonderful discussion. We'll try to have the topics updated later today. In a few hours, I'll have dinner break and see how my son's day at school was, and I'll start on my index, and we'll see everyone on Tuesday. I want to thank again everyone. Please stay safe and healthy. Thanks for the great questions, and look forward to seeing everyone on Tuesday of next week. Take care.